My name is Connor Mitchell, and I'm a 41-year-old petroleum engineer from Houston. I've always considered myself a rational man, someone who believes in what he can see, touch, and measure. Science has been my religion, facts my doctrine. What I'm about to share with you defies everything I've ever believed in. I've debated whether to tell this story for months now, but the nightmares won't stop, and perhaps putting these words down will exorcise some of the demons that haunt me. This isn't some campfire tale or urban legend. This happened to me last winter at the abandoned Blackwater Refinery in West Texas. It started as a routine assignment. My company had acquired the long-shuttered Blackwater facility, and I was part of the assessment team sent to evaluate its potential for renovation. The refinery had been closed for nearly 15 years after a series of workplace accidents culminated in a fire that killed 3 workers. Local rumors suggested the place was cursed, but such superstitions are common around old industrial sites with tragic histories. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late January. The winter sun was already setting as I pulled up to the main gate, painting the rusted metal structures in shades of amber and gold. The facility sprawled across several acres of dusty Texas plains, a maze of towers, tanks, and pipelines slowly being reclaimed by nature. I remember thinking it looked like an industrial graveyard, a thought that would prove more prophetic than I could have imagined. The security guard, an older man named Frank with leathery skin and a perpetual squint, greeted me with a grunt as he checked my credentials. "You staying overnight?" he asked, eyeing my overnight bag. "Yeah, planning to get an early start tomorrow," I replied. Frank's expression darkened. "Don't recommend it. Motel's just 20 minutes down the highway." "Company's paying me to be thorough. Some of the systems need to be monitored through a night cycle," I explained, though this wasn't entirely true. I just wanted to avoid the daily commute. "Your funeral," Frank muttered, handing back my ID. "Just stay in the admin building. Don't go wandering after dark." I laughed it off as the typical warnings of a bored security guard trying to spook the city boy. "Any particular reason?" "Place changes at night," was all he said before buzzing me through. The administration building was a 2-story concrete structure near the entrance, relatively untouched by the decay affecting the rest of the facility. I set up my equipment in what had once been the site manager's office, a spacious room with large windows overlooking the refinery complex. The electricity still worked, thankfully, though the heating system was temperamental at best. I spent the remainder of the daylight hours familiarizing myself with the site maps and inspection reports. As darkness fell, I ordered a pizza delivery and settled in for what I expected to be an uneventful night reviewing documents and preparing my assessment strategy. The first hint that something was wrong came around 10:30 p.m. I was deep into analyzing maintenance records when a sound cut through the silence, a long, mournful howl that seemed to reverberate through the building. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. It sounded like a wolf, but larger somehow, the vocalization too powerful, too human in its inflection. "Texas has coyotes, not wolves," I reminded myself. Perhaps it was just the wind playing tricks through the metal structures outside. Yet something primitive within me recognized that sound as a predator's call. I tried to return to my work, but found myself repeatedly drawn to the window, scanning the darkened refinery below. The full moon cast everything in silvery light, creating sharp contrast between illuminated metal and impenetrable shadow. The second howl came about 20 minutes later, closer this time. Definitely not the wind. My rational mind began offering explanations. A feral dog, perhaps, or some local kids playing pranks on the out-of-towner. I decided to call Frank, the security guard, but discovered there was no cell reception inside the building. The landline was long disconnected. Just before midnight, I heard something else. A rhythmic clanging, like metal striking metal, moving through the refinery. Following my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the exterior stairwell that led down from the second floor. The January air bit through my jacket as I swept my light across the facility. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small against the vastness of the complex. "Security? Is someone there?" The clanging stopped immediately. The silence that followed was somehow worse. That's when I saw it, a flash of movement between 2 storage tanks about 100 yards away. Something large moving on all fours, but not quite like any animal I recognized. My flashlight beam caught it for just a second, A massive shape with what looked like a hunched, humanoid torso, but elongated limbs that bent wrong. I told myself it was just a coyote or wild dog. The strange proportions were tricks of the shadows in my anxious mind. Yet even as I retreated back inside, locking the door behind me, I knew I was lying to myself. Sleep was out of the question now. I barricaded the office door with a desk and kept my flashlight close. Hours passed in tense silence. I convinced myself I had overreacted until I heard the distinct sound of claws scraping across the concrete walls outside. Something was climbing the building. I watched in horror as a shadow passed across the moonlit window, much larger than a man. The scratching continued around the perimeter, as if the thing was testing for weaknesses, seeking a way in. Then came a sound from the roof, heavy footsteps moving back and forth overhead. The rational part of my brain was shutting down, giving way to primal fear. This wasn't a person. It wasn't any animal I knew. The way it moved, sometimes on all fours, sometimes upright, defied natural explanation. Just before dawn, exhausted and terrified, I must have drifted into a light sleep. I awoke to silence in the first gray light of morning filtering through the windows. Whatever had stalked the facility during the night was gone. I quickly gathered my things, no longer concerned with my assignment. All I wanted was to leave this place. As I hurried toward my car, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Across the gravel parking area were tracks, not human footprints nor those of any known animal. They resembled wolf prints but were massive, nearly the size of dinner plates, and in some places they transformed, becoming more elongated, more human. Frank arrived for the morning shift just as I was throwing my bag into the car. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he remarked, studying my face. "Something was here last night," I said, my voice hoarse. "Something big." Frank's expression didn't change. "Told you not to stay overnight." "What is it?" I demanded. "You know something." He sighed, looking suddenly older. "Every full moon. Been happening since the accident. Some say it's one of the men who died in the fire, cursed to something not human anymore. Others think it was always here, and the refinery disturbed its territory." "That's superstitious nonsense," I said, though my conviction had never felt more hollow. "Maybe," Frank conceded, "but I've worked here 7 years and I've buried 2 night guards who didn't listen. Whatever it is, it's territorial. It usually leaves by dawn, retreats somewhere into the old drainage tunnels beneath the complex. I should have left then. I should have driven straight back to Houston, filed my report recommending the site be sold for scrap, and forgotten everything. That would have been the rational, sensible thing to do. Instead, I called my supervisor and requested a team delay of 24 hours, citing environmental concerns. Then I drove to the nearest town, bought a digital camera with night vision capabilities, and waited for sunset. I can't fully explain why I went back. Professional curiosity, stubborn skepticism, or perhaps some deeper, darker fascination? Whatever the reason, I returned to Blackwater Refinery as the sun was setting, armed with my camera and a hunting knife I'd purchased from a local sporting goods store. A pathetic defense in retrospect. This time, I didn't stay in the administration building. I set up in one of the elevated control rooms that offered a panoramic view of the central processing area. From here, I could document whatever was stalking the facility without being easily detected. Night fell. The full moon rose once again, casting its cold light over the rusted kingdom of pipes and tanks. I waited, camera ready, still half believing I'd imagined the previous night's events. The howl came at 9:47 p.m. I know because I checked my watch, determined to document everything with scientific precision. It originated from the southern perimeter, where the refinery backed up against a stretch of scrubland. I pointed my camera in that direction and began recording. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then I heard it, the same metallic clanging from the night before, moving methodically through the facility. I tracked the sound with my camera, and that's when I captured the first clear footage of what I can only describe as a werewolf. I know how that sounds. If someone had told me this story a week earlier, I would have questioned their sanity or sobriety. But the creature I filmed moving between the distillation columns was no man in a costume, no trick of the light. It stood over 7 feet tall when upright, with the general shape of a wolf but grotesquely enlarged and merged with human characteristics. Its forelimbs were too long, ending in hands that were neither paw nor human fingers, but some horrific hybrid with curved, blackened claws. Its hindquarters bent like a wolf's, yet it could transition to walking upright with disturbing ease. The head was lupine but oversized, with a protruding snout filled with teeth that gleamed in the moonlight. And its eyes, God, its eyes, reflected the camera's infrared as blazing orbs of hatred and hunger. Its body was covered in patchy, mangy fur that failed to conceal rippling muscles, and what looked like burn scars across its shoulders and back. That detail connected with something Frank had mentioned. One of the men who died in the fire, transformed into something inhuman. I watched through the camera as it moved with purpose, sniffing the air, clearly hunting. Hunting me. It knew I had returned. For nearly 20 minutes I documented its movements, my hands shaking so badly that much of the footage was blurred. Then it stopped suddenly, raising its head toward my hiding place. It had caught my scent. What followed was a nightmare of pursuit. I abandoned the control room just as the creature began scaling the outer structure with impossible agility. I fled through a maze of catwalks and ladders, hearing metal groan and snap behind me as it followed. I ended up trapped in the central processing building, a cavernous space filled with massive equipment. The only exit was the way I had come in, now blocked by the approaching monster. I concealed myself behind a bank of pressure vessels, still clutching my camera, documenting what I was certain would be my final moments. The creature entered slowly, almost cautiously. In the enclosed space, I could smell it, a pungent mix of wet animal, charred meat, and something chemical that burned my nostrils. It moved methodically between the equipment, searching, occasionally rising onto its hind legs to peer over obstacles. I knew it would find me eventually. The building had no other exits, and daybreak was hours away. In desperation, I noticed a maintenance tunnel, barely 2 feet in diameter, running along the floor near my position. It was likely part of the drainage system Frank had mentioned. As the creature's growls grew closer, I made a decision. I would never outrun it, but perhaps I could escape through spaces too small for its massive frame. I scrambled toward the tunnel entrance, prying off the rusted grate as quietly as possible. The noise gave me away. I heard a roar, part wolf howl, part human scream, as the creature charged. I dove into the tunnel headfirst, crawling frantically through pitch darkness as claws scraped at the opening behind me. The tunnel was a nightmare of claustrophobia and panic. Spiderwebs clung to my face, and the walls were slick with some foul-smelling moisture. I could hear the creature's frustrated howls echoing through the metal tube as I squirmed forward, praying the passage wouldn't narrow further or end in a solid wall. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel widened into a larger drainage chamber. Dim moonlight filtered through a grated opening above, revealing a circular room about 15 feet across with several tunnel entrances. Rusty ladders led up to what I hoped was an exit to the surface. As I paused to catch my breath, I heard a new sound, scraping and scratching, coming not from the tunnel I'd escaped through, but from one of the others. The creature had found another way into the drainage system. I scrambled up the nearest ladder toward the moonlight, reaching a heavy metal cover that had once sealed the shaft. It was partially ajar, allowing just enough light to guide my climb. I pushed against it with all my strength, feeling it give way inch by inch. Below me, something massive splashed into the chamber. I didn't look down. I couldn't. I forced my body through the opening, emerging into the cold night air somewhere on the eastern edge of the refinery complex. I had only seconds. I sprinted toward the perimeter fence, no longer caring about documentation or evidence. Behind me, metal shrieked as the creature burst from the drainage shaft, its howl of rage echoing across the abandoned facility. The fence was topped with barbed wire, but fear gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I threw my camera and bag over first, then climbed, feeling the sharp barbs tear at my clothes and skin. As I dropped to the other side, I heard the creature closing the distance. My car was parked near the main gate, too far away. Instead, I ran into the scrubland beyond the fence, hoping the dense vegetation might slow my pursuer or offer hiding places. The full moon illuminated the landscape in surreal detail as I crashed through brush and leaped over rocks. I don't know how long I ran. Time became meaningless, reduced to the rhythm of my pounding heart and gasping breath. Eventually, I realized I no longer heard pursuit. I collapsed behind a large boulder, finally daring to look back toward the refinery. The creature stood at the fence line, pacing back and forth like a sentry. It wouldn't cross the boundary of the facility. Whatever bound it to Blackwater, curse, territory, or something else entirely, seemed to prevent it from leaving the grounds. I watched until dawn began to break. As the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, the creature retreated, loping back toward the main complex and disappearing into the shadows of the refinery. I waited another hour before finding the courage to retrieve my car. Frank was surprised to see me again, his expression grim when he noticed my torn clothes and the scratches on my arms. "You're lucky to be alive," was all he said. I nodded beyond words. Before leaving, I asked him one question. "The men who died in the fire, what were their names?" "Roberts, Tanner, and Connor," he replied. "Connor Mitchell." I felt the blood drain from my face. That's my name." Frank's eyes widened slightly. Hell of a coincidence. But we both knew it wasn't coincidence. Somehow, I shared more than just a name with the man who had been transformed by the fire and the full moon. There was a connection, one I still don't understand. I left Texas that day and haven't returned. The footage I captured was corrupted. Whether by proximity to the creature or by some property of the phenomenon itself, I don't know. All that remained were a few blurry frames that could easily be dismissed as fabrications. My company ultimately decided against reopening Blackwater Refinery. The official report cited environmental contamination and structural degradation. I didn't contradict these findings. Sometimes, especially during the full moon, I wake with the taste of blood in my mouth and dirt under my fingernails. I've installed cameras in my apartment, motion sensors that would detect if I leave during the night. So far, they have recorded nothing unusual, but I've started having dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams of running on all fours through an industrial labyrinth of pipes and tanks, hunting for the scent of an intruder, driven by rage and territorial fury. And in these dreams, I look down at limbs that are not human, at hands that are not hands, and I know with growing certainty that whatever connection exists between myself and the Blackwater creature is not finished with me. I don't know what happens next. I've considered ending things before I discover what I might become when the transformation completes. But some stubborn part of me, the engineer who still believes in rational explanations, holds on to hope that there's a solution, a way to break whatever cycle I've become part of. Until then, I avoid Texas, I avoid refineries, and most of all, I avoid the full moon. If you find yourself near an abandoned industrial site as darkness falls, particularly in the remote areas of West Texas, take my advice. Don't stay overnight. Some territories belong to things that defy explanation, predators that should not exist. And if you ever meet another Connor Mitchell, run. It might be me, but I might not be me anymore.